Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joseph Miranda. I'm the broker and owner of Miranda Executive Realty. Thank you again for joining, for tuning in to our latest installment of Ask the Broker. I'm very excited about the guest speaker that we have. She's going to be speaking about something very important in the real estate industry, something that I think everybody needs to know and needs to learn. So, but before we jump into it, as usual, I'm going to give you, I'm going to take a moment for our shameless plug. So if you watch this training, if you see this training, if you'd like to learn more about Miranda Executive Realty, what we have to offer and how we can help you take your business to the next level, you can scan the QR code here or look down in the comments and you'll see a link there where you can, where you can schedule an appointment with us. Also, questions and answers will be handled a little bit different today. Normally we say, save them to the end. But today, because of our guest speaker and her preferences, go ahead and just raise your hand. So if you have any questions, just push the little hand button on your phone or on your computer, however you're watching this, and then let her finish up her thought, let her finish up whatever wherever she's at, and she'll be sure to call you. You could also put them in the in-call messages, and I think she'll see them. Let me not speak for her here on that, but if she doesn't, we'll be sure that we let her know and get to that. One real quick disclaimer here. So, my name is Joseph Miranda. I'm the broker and owner of this company. I am not an appraiser. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a mortgage broker. I am nothing but a real estate, a real estate broker, real estate agent. So all of these opinions, all of these views, including by our speaker, Dorothy Leatherwood, please seek out legal counsel. Please seek out, speak to your CPA, whatever it is. This is not meant to be any type of advice. These are opinions with some facts involved, but, every situation is going to be different. So make sure you seek professional guidance before you make any decisions. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker. This guest speaker, I've known her for a long time. I don't really know how long I've known her, to be honest. I just know that every time I have an appraisal question, every time a customer needs an appraisal, every time, I need an appraisal done for somebody, she's the first person I call. She's always answered the phone. She hasn't answered. She's always returned my phone calls. I have a very, very high level of respect for her. And I was sharing an anecdote earlier that, years ago, I was speaking with an appraiser and I asked the appraiser how long he had been an appraiser. And he was like, well, look at my license number and tell me what you think. And I don't remember the number, but it was a very, very low number. And I just figured this out with Dorothy, that she actually has a very low number. She is in the first class of people that were licensed, that became a licensed appraiser when the law passed. She's been doing appraisals for about 40 years now. So needless to say, she probably knows what she's talking about, and she's definitely earned her spot here to teach us about appraisals. That being said, I'm going to hand it over. Dorothy, go ahead and take it away.
Hey, Joe, thank you for all of the wonderful comments. I appreciate all that. Yes, I was in the first class of certified appraisers in the state of Florida. I was born and raised in South Florida and currently in Central Florida, but I do appraisals for anything between here and there. And I appreciate you letting me talk to your agents here and maybe share some things and learn how appraisers and realtors can work together. So if anybody needs to contact me, want to reach out, you're welcome to call or text at the phone number on the screen or send emails to either one of those email addresses. I do check all of them all the time. So if you want to move forward to the next slide, we'll see if we can get this one started. Okay, I know that you guys all know what a CMA is, and I know that you've all heard what an appraisal is. I'm not sure that everybody really understands the differences between them. So this is just going to be a little quick one on here. When you all do a CMA, you're typically doing it to establish a listing price. You're not under any specific guidelines. You're not under any specific regulations. There's not really a big brother looking over your shoulder at everything that you put in an appraisal, but it's a great tool for you to establish a relationship with your sellers, and to get the properties out there and get them listed at at the price they should be listed at. But keep in mind, there's a difference between price and value. An appraisal is done to establish a fair market value as of a certain date. And we'll talk about that again in a few minutes. But the appraiser is under federal regulations, state regulations, and there's always somebody reviewing our appraisals, and an appraisal never dies. It's out there. Once you send it out, it's out there forever. And anybody at any time can come back and talk to you and question what you did. So it's a little bit more stringent, a little bit more regulated than doing a CMA. Listing price is what you want to list it at to get people excited, to get people to come see your house. It's not necessarily going to be the price that it sells for. We all know that a few years ago, not so many few years, but a couple years back, people were paying way over listing price, which made establishing market value really hard. Now we're back to normal, where people are negotiating a little bit more. And the crazy thing is, in this market right now, it's still really hard for us to establish fair market value. Keep in mind when you're doing it that you guys are giving them a price, and we have to give the lender a value to loan on. And there are differences there. If you can go to the next slide. Just want to give you guys a little bit of background into what actually goes into doing an appraisal. It's a little bit more than just showing up, taking pictures, and leaving the property. We have to start with who's the user of the report, and why do they need it? What are they going to use it for? And that's the ones that you all will be most typically aware of will be the ones that are used where the user is the lender, and the use is for mortgage financing purposes. That's what you'll typically see, but there's a lot of different appraisals types out there and all kinds of different users. And we'll get to, a little bit more about that when we're talk about private versus mortgage. Then we have to determine the type of value. All of the GSEs, all of the major lenders are looking for fair market value. Typically as of a certain date. Now it can be a retrospective date or it can be a current date. The only thing we don't do is prospective values, because things could change in a half hour from the time you write it. So we don't do anything into the future, but we can analyze the past. Then you go, and once you get the order, you research the property, you pull up what you can find on public records, you pull up what you can find at MLS, and then we talk to the realtor or the owner and schedule an appointment to go out and inspect the property. I have to say, this is my favorite part of the job. Probably the reason why I've stayed in it for so long is no two properties are ever the same. You can be in a subdivision where there's only 4 models, but no two properties in that subdivision are going to be exactly the same. So it keeps it fun and interesting, and I don't get bored so easy. The big thing is, the next really important part of it is just determining what your subject's neighborhood boundaries are and what your market area is. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in depth too in a couple slides away. Then we research the market trends in the neighborhood and the market area. And those are two different things. They can overlap, but they are two different things. The neighborhood is the wide range. Like Eagle Trace in Coral Springs, the neighborhood is Eagle Trace. But the market area can change even within Eagle Trace. There could be the houses that are smaller houses, smaller tract style houses. But then there's also the houses that are the large custom built houses. And I know Eagle Trace is going back some, but it just happened to be the one that popped up to my brain first. So you have to be able to know where the market changes. So if you have townhouses, small tract style houses, and luxury homes all within the same neighborhood, you have 3 different markets in that neighborhood. So when you're picking comps and when you're looking at the comps that you're going to use on your CMA, make sure you know the difference and make sure you know which ones are actually going to be comparable. And we'll talk some more about that. Then we research the sales and the listings in both the neighborhood and in the market. Typically, we're not allowed to go back more than 12 months. Most lenders prefer that you don't go back more than 6 months. But there are some cases, high-end properties, there's a lot of times when you don't have sales that are remotely comparable in the last 18 to 24 months. So there are ways to look at the property, but you have to know how to analyze the property and analyze the neighborhood to know whether that's common or not. So, which goes to the next bullet point there, analyze all of the data. And as an appraiser, I love getting information from realtors. I will ask realtors when I set up the appointment, I will say, if there's any comps that you would like me to consider, please feel free to bring them with you or email them to me, because I want us to be working together. If we're not working together, none of us are going to make any money. Yes, Carolina. Do you have a question? No. Okay. All right. Can you get to the next slide, please? Okay. So after we're analyzing all of the properties and all the data that we've gathered, and we use sales and listings. Most lenders now require listings to be at least 1, preferably 2 listings to be in an appraisal. And you have to select the ones that are most comparable to the subject. And I'm going to give you guys some things to look at so that when you're doing your listing prices and your CMAs, these are the things you need to pay attention to in the next bullet. The location of the property, the site size, the view, the age, the condition, the living area, and any amenities that a buyer would pay more for. In South Florida, anything close to the intercoastal, anything close to the ocean is going to pay for a lot more. People are going to be willing to pay a lot more for a house that's on the intercoastal or on the ocean than a house that's on a dry lot, typically, depending on the buyer, because everything is subject to the market and the buyers. Up here in Central Florida, the closer you get to Disney World, the more the properties are worth. So are valued at. I won't say they're worth, but they're valued at more the closer you get to the theme parks, Disney and Universal. And then we have to determine, again, the type of value. They want a fair market value. Do they want an as-is value, a subject to value? Do they want a rental value? Do they want to know the value from the income approach? There's 3 approaches to value, and there's multiple types of value. So we have to make sure that we're writing and analyzing the information that's required from the lender. And you can see there we analyze the comparables, and we usually put them all out on a grid, and we have to do a lot of math, which for somebody who hated math in school is probably a question why I still like this job. But we do have to go back and analyze everything so that we can determine what the adjustments are and what the market is willing to pay or not pay for an item. The market doesn't always see things the same way we do. It doesn't always see things the same way as realtors. So we have to look at what the market is saying in that market area, what's valued and what's not. Then we determine the value, and it's an opinion of value because nobody's perfect. You can't give an exact number, although they do require one number on the bottom of the appraisal. My opinion is we should have always been able to give a range, but I'll fight that fight next time the market crashes. And then the last thing we do is we write up the appraisal report. Now, when an appraisal report leaves me, it doesn't go directly to the lender. So, and we'll touch on that in a couple more slides down. So this is the general process, and writing up an appraisal can take from 2 hours to, I did one over the weekend that took me almost 24 hours total to just write it up after I inspected the property. So it's a very unique, very complex, very large property. So there's a lot more to it, like I said, than just showing up and taking pictures and walking through a house and leaving. It's all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes before I get there and after we leave that makes a difference in what we're doing. If you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is, I told you guys that we have Big Brother looking over us and that we're federally regulated now, as well as state regulated. They also came up with the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. You guys, I'm sure that you've all heard the word USPAP. I'm not sure everybody really understands that. So just a quick little background on USPAP. It is the Bible by which our appraisals are judged now. They can't tell us what to do for value. They can't make us do a number or anything like that, but the steps that we take, which are basically the steps that we just covered. But if you pay attention to this definition, and it'll be on 2 slides here, but I'll just walk you through this one. The most probable price which a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale, the buyer and seller each acting prudently and knowledgeably, and assuming the price is not affected by undue stimulus. Next slide, please. Implicit in this definition is the consummation of a sale as of a specified date and the passing of title from seller to buyer under conditions whereby the buyer and seller are typically motivated, both parties are well informed or well advised, and each is acting in what they consider their best interest. A reasonable time is allowed for exposure in the open market. Payment is made in terms of cash in the United States dollars or in terms of a financial arrangement comparable thereto. The price represents the normal consideration for the property sold, unaffected by special or creative financing or sales concessions. So it's pretty simple. Everybody has to be working to their best interest. They have to be typically motivated. It's not pending foreclosure is not a typical motivation. That's a special condition, special circumstance. Estate sales and estate appraisals, that's not a typical motivation. That's somebody trying to dispose of properties that they don't need or they can't afford, or whatever the reason is. Those are the things that as an appraiser we need to know when we're looking at a sale. So if you're looking at a neighborhood, and I'm just going to be in general numbers and general terms, and your house, most of your houses range from 250 to 350, but you have 2 or 3 that sold for 175, 200,000, and you have 1 that sold or 2 that sold for 500,000, but they're all 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses. They're all within, 2,000 to 2,200 square feet, no swimming pools, no water, just a house. When you look at the market and you analyze the market and you see those 2 or 3 that are really, really low and that one that's really, really high, you don't go to those. There's something there. You need to find out what it is. The low ones could be foreclosures, short sales, estate sales. The high one could be that somebody just wanted that house right there because it was next door to their parents or next door to their children or next door to their best friend, and they were willing to pay whatever it took to get it. Those aren't typically motivated buyers and sellers. So we don't typically use those in the appraisal. We look at them, we research them, we analyze them, but they're usually discarded because they are not truly comparable to what's the appraisal that's in front of you for a fair market value. And hopefully that makes sense. Can you go to the next slide, please? And here's a question that that I heard earlier today. Fannie Mae and FHA, their values are different. I hear this all the time. I have heard multiple people say this. FHA is always lower than Fannie Mae, and they have a different market value, and that's why we don't let our buyers go use FHA. Well, I'm not going to read it all out loud to you, but if you go through this chart and go line by line, and then you go back up 2 slides before, you'll see that fair market value is fair market value is fair market value. It does not matter whether it's going to FHA, doesn't matter if it's going to Fannie Mae. USPAP says that they all have to be the same, and they all have the same wording. They copied their requirements from USPAP. Everything is the same. It's word for word because they just cut and paste it. So don't automatically assume that that you're good, that FHA, and let me not even say assume. Don't tell anybody that FHA values are lower than Fannie Mae values. As you can see on the screen, the definition is the same for any federally regulated finance transaction in the United States. So it doesn't matter what state you're in, doesn't matter what county you're in, doesn't matter anything, doesn't matter. The fair market value definition and the process that we have to go through to get to that is all exactly the same. Caroline, I hope that in the next you'll see it a little bit more clear, but I hope that helps clear up some of the questions that you had earlier. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is where I wanted to talk to you guys about things to consider when you're listing a property so that you guys and the realtors and the appraisers can work together. This has been a pet peeve of mine for 40 years. We all need to work together. We all need to share information. If we're not working together, none of us are getting paid. And it makes no sense to make everything a big secret. So if an appraiser calls and asks you questions about your listing, tell them we're not out to steal. We can't steal your commission because most of us aren't realtors. I will say that I started out that way. I may go back to that soon, but not right now, not till things get better. We're not competing with realtors, but we need that information to help you guys be able to sell the properties that you're listing. So when I said earlier that fair market value is fair market value, yes, it is. Here's the differences between FHA and Fannie Mae. It comes to the property, not the value that's going to be on the appraisal, but the property. There are certain things that FHA requires that Fannie Mae doesn't really require on a conventional mortgage. Financing wise, qualifying for an FHA appraisal is so much easier than qualifying somebody for a conventional mortgage. I'm not a mortgage broker, but I have a son who is one. So him and I talk about this all the time. There's a list coming up on the next slide. FHA does not require cosmetic or minor defects or deferred maintenance and normal wear and tear to be repaired. They do not require it as long as it does not affect the soundness, safety, or security of the property. So if the window is cracked, they don't care. If the window is broken out, and somebody can get in, they care. Missing handrails on a 2-story house or on a house that's on a pier and beam foundation that has a crawl space under it, they don't make you fix it, but depending on how steep the climb is and how many steps are in it. And that can depend on what the underwriter sees when they're looking at it. So as you can see, most of these things are, like I said, cracked window, no. A broken out window, yes, that has to be replaced, because that allows animals to get in, allows people to get in, allows wind and rain and weather to get in. So keep in mind, their concern is the safety, soundness, and security of your building, of the house. Okay. The one caveat on this list is homes that were built prior to 1978 have lead-based paint. If you're looking at a property to list, or you're looking at a property to buy, and the house was built prior to 1978, walk around and look around the outside. Is the paint peeling on the walls on the outside? Is the fascia board peeling? Any place that you can see a different color of paint or anything like that, FHA will require that house, that area of paint that's peeling, cracked, chipped, that area will have to be sealed. It will have to be cleaned and sealed. And on their website, they give you all of the ways that they can clean and seal it. And the reason is because of, even to this day, that lead-based paint is still there. And once the paint cracks, it exposes that lead to the air, and now you're breathing it in. So that's the one caveat, is that they will require that, because that is a definite safety and health condition issue. Okay, if you would go to the next slide. Okay, these are the items that FHA will require to be working. No frayed or exposed wires in an electric box. All habitable rooms must have a functioning heat source, except in a few select cities. They haven't changed it yet. I haven't seen it changed yet, but in South Florida, anything from Lake Okeechobee down did not have to have functioning heat source in every room. There had to be a functioning heat source in the house, but it did not have to be in every room. The roofs in the attics, I hate climbing up into an attic. I put my head and shoulders up and look around. It looks good. I get down, because I've actually taken a picture of an attic in the past. And really long time ago, guys, is when I had the film developed, there were 4 red beady eyes staring at me. And I don't climb and go into the attics anymore. So the roof has to be watertight. It must have at least 2 more years of effective life left in it. The appraiser must inspect the attic for evidence of possible problems. The roof cannot have more than 3 layers of roofing. And if the inspection reveals the need for roof repairs, and the roof has already got 3 or more layers of roofing on there, FHA will require a new roof. I'm going to stop there for a second, because this is a big thing in pretty much everywhere in the state of Florida. The roof is the main. If the roof is bad, then your house is not going to be safe and secure and sound. But on the flip side of that, I'm not a roofing contractor. I'm not an engineer. So I can't tell if it's what it is, but I can see that there's problems. I can see that there's water stains on the ceiling. I can see where there's water that's been running down, but either behind the drywall or the plaster walls of the house, and it's coming from the top. So I know that there's an issue there. I will end up making that appraisal subject to a roof inspection by a licensed roofing contractor, because that's not something I'm trained in. I can't tell what it is. It may just be that a nail popped up in the shingles, or one of the tiles on a tile roof is broken loose from the tar paper that's holding it on. But it's not my job to go up there and look. It's beyond my expertise. So that's something that when you're out looking at, when you're listing meetings and you're talking about a property, and even if you're working with, when you're working with the buyer, walk around the house, walk and don't just look at the middle of the walls or the tile on the floor or the carpet. Look up, walk out and look into the electrical panel. Is it all breakers? Is it all, are there old fuses that were in there? Look at those, because those are things that will stop you from being able to qualify for an FHA appraisal. Okay, next slide, please. Contaminated soil is hard to find. It's hard to tell if it's uncontaminated soil. There's a property at the corner of Commercial Boulevard and Power Line Road. And I don't know if you guys, I'm sure that you guys all know what the area that I'm talking about, but there's a big commercial building there that was found to have been built over the top of a hazardous waste dump. And they can't even lease the property most of the time now. Nobody wants to stay in it. So eventually they're going to have to tear the building down and treat the soil underneath and clean it up. But and that's not the only one. There's several of them around South Florida, especially when you get further out west, where in the good old days, that's where people took their trash and to the dump. And it wasn't always the ones that are, the big one in Pompano or the one down in Davie. We didn't always have those. So people used to take their old appliances and just dump them behind a bunch of trees on the side of the road, and they stayed there. It's a problem. So you have to be careful and hope that that everything has been cleared up. Airport noises and hazards, heavy traffic, those have to be noted on the appraisal. So if the property is on a very busy street, FHA wants to know how bad is the traffic. And you better have at least one comp on your appraisal that is in the same place or a very similar road. Airport noise and hazards. I never really thought of the little airport on right off of Federal Highway in Pompano as being an airport hazard, but FHA considers it a hazard because even though there's small planes, there are planes going in and out. They can fall out of the sky. They can make noise. They can drop fuel. So all of those hazards have to be looked at. That doesn't mean that they won't loan on a property there. It just means that they have to, there may be other things that they require the seller to get inspected or have proof of before they will close on it. Something being close to a gas station, a laundromat, dry cleaners, those things, all of their chemicals have been known to seep into the soil and contaminate the ground underneath. So those aren't always easy for us to see, but if we're doing an appraisal and if you're looking at a property and the backyard backs up to the back of a gas station, it's going to be a challenge to get FHA to loan on it, but it doesn't mean they won't. Just means that there are other things that they may require to be done. The hazards and nuisances, it has to be easy, safe for people to get in and out of the property. So you don't want, let me see, trying to think of a good example, but one's not coming to mind now. The streets, Hollywood, in a lot of the areas in the east side of Hollywood, the areas where when it rains for 5 minutes, you have 5 feet of standing water. That's a hazard and a nuisance that FHA may request additional information for, may request a higher level of flood insurance. So keep these things in mind. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Those things are, again, part of the safety and security and soundness of the building. Any defective structural conditions or other conditions that could lead to future structural conditions. I'm not a structural engineer. Appraisers are not typically structural engineers. I can't tell what's wrong with the property, but I can tell you that if I'm walking through the house and I walk from the front door to the back door, I can tell if the floor is uneven. I can tell if the floor is slanted. This could be a problem, but it requires somebody with a higher scope of knowledge than I have to determine if this is something that has to be fixed. So again, as the appraiser, I would call for an inspection by a structural engineer. I'm not changing the value of the property, but these are requirements that FHA has, and they have to be addressed. There's still some asbestos, and although not included on this, there are still some properties in South Florida that have defective drywall. It got tagged with the name Chinese drywall. I don't think that's appropriate, but there was a lot of defective drywall that contained asbestos and contained other ingredients and to make it sound, but was found to be dangerous and made a lot of people very sick. So if you're walking through a house and it's been remodeled or was remodeled during the mid 2000s, 2008 to 2012, 14, in there when we were building a lot of new properties in the area, especially in South Florida. If you're walking through a house and you happen to see a bathroom mirror, a wall on the mirror on the wall in the bathroom, if the bottom of it or the sides of it look like the foil, the aluminum on the back are starting to peel off, it's worth asking the homeowner if that bathroom was remodeled during the years when Chinese drywall was an issue, because it doesn't go away. It has to be removed, but it can cause health issues for people living in the house. So it's not asbestos per se, but that's something else that you need to just keep an eye out for. The bathrooms always become a big problem. Are the toilets there? Is the sink, does the sink work? Is there a shower? When the market was crashed back in 2007 and 8, people would walk out with the toilet and the sink. I don't know where they were going with it, but they would walk out with the toilet and the sink. They would also, I've been in a couple of houses where they decided in a townhouse to dump quickcrete in the bathtub and the toilet in the bathrooms upstairs and flush it down and run it down through the pipes, causing all of the pipes to have to be replaced in that property because the concrete hardened and nothing was going up or down. So you have to have a toilet, you have to have a sink, and you have to have a shower. That's a requirement. If those things aren't there, they have to be put back in. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take a break here for just a second. There are a couple other things that weren't really mentioned on this list. FHA does require at least a stove in the kitchen for people to be able to prepare food to nourish themselves. It sounds ridiculous, but people will walk out and take the appliances with them. It doesn't have to have a refrigerator, but it does have to have a stove. So keep that in mind too, just a little side note. And at the core of this, I just want you guys to understand that FHA's value is the same as Fannie Mae's value, as anybody else's value is, as long as it's a fair market value. The only difference is those things that FHA requires the property to have, or the condition that they require the property to be in. They do have certain types of loans that will that they can make for properties that are going to be rehabbed, but that's not what your typical buyer is going to be looking at. So if you're working with a buyer who's an investor, check with them. Check with FHA. There are programs out there. There are a lot of different ways to do it. I just am trying to stop people from the misguided impression that FHA is, that appraisers do something different on FHA properties than we do on Fannie Mae properties. But that's just not true. And you've got the proof. If somebody says that to you, you can all say, no, look, here's the definition. It's exactly the same. We're doing the same work. We're required to do the same work in the same process, support everything that we do. And it doesn't matter who it's for, other than the things that FHA wants you to make sure that the property has or doesn't have. And if it does, then we can make, conditions and make the appraisal subject to different inspections or different things being taken care of. When you're listing the property, think about it. Walk through the house with your homeowner and ask them or point out things. If there's things in there that you think might fall within this list, you need to discuss with your homeowner. Are they willing to pay to have those things taken care of? So before you click conventional FHA, VA on your listing, and it goes out to the public like that, make sure that the homeowner is willing to do what might be necessary to sell it as an FHA home under an FHA contract. The appraisals themselves are exactly the same. FHA requires different addendums because those addendums have to address most of the issues that we just talked about. So when you're, and it happens quite frequently nowadays. You start out with your buyer buying it with conventional financing, and halfway through they switch it over to FHA. And typically the reason for that is because it's easier to qualify for FHA than conventional. But then it requires the appraiser to come back out and do another walkthrough, because we have to inspect it with a different set of eyes this time, so to say. And we have to say that as of the date that FHA requested it and they have a new case number, that appraisal has to be redone and have a different inspection date. So it's a totally new appraisal of the same property, but that it happens a lot, and there should be no dramatic differences if two different appraisers do it or if the same appraiser does it. If you did your job correctly the first time, it won't make any difference in what you do when you do it on an FHA appraisal. I hope that answers some questions, and I hope that makes it a little clear. If you guys have any other questions about that, again, along with anything else we talk about today, just contact me. I have no problem talking to anybody. I want us all to be able to work together. Earlier, when we were going through the process of appraising, and I told you that there was a difference between a market area and a neighborhood, and that they could be overlapping, but there's two different things. So this is just a little graphic, a little definition here, so that you can understand when you're looking at what properties you want to use as comparables. If you're in a subdivision that has townhouses on one side, on 3 streets, and single family houses on the next 5 streets, but they're all in the same subdivision, and your property that you want to list that your buyer wants to buy is one of the townhouses, you can't really compare those to detached single family houses. They're not comparable. So, again, doing CMAs, neighborhood is the same as for appraisals. The neighborhood is the larger general area. And that's, you can usually clearly see the boundaries for that when you drive around. But the market area is going to be where the homes that are more similar and are comparable to the property that you are in design and size and age, and in location. So when you're looking for your CMAs and you're looking to, if you get an appraisal and you don't like, or somebody doesn't like the appraisal value once it filters its way through back to the buyer. And there are ways to do it. There are ways to request a reconsideration of value. But make sure that when you send new comps through the lender to the appraiser to have the appraiser look at them, make sure that you're actually picking comparable ones, not just sales. A closed sale does not mean it's comparable, but a comparable always has to be a closed sale. Okay, can we go to the next slide? And this is just the same thing I just said. Make sure that you know the difference, you know where you are, and what you're looking at. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, and here's another thing that's become an issue a lot in the last 5 years, 10 years maybe. Comps or comparables. What's the difference? You can see here that on this that says comps or comparables are nearby properties that appraisers use to estimate a property's value, considering factors like location, size, view, age, condition, GLA, bedrooms, bathrooms, and amenities. And they are. And there's nothing wrong with calling it a comp, as long as you remember that it has to be comparable to the subject property and those factors that are listed there. If I've had time and time again, I will say to the realtor, if you want me to consider any other comps, feel free to bring them with you or email them. I'm doing an 1,800 square foot house, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths on a dry lot, and it's selling for $400,000. And I will get sales that a realtor has told me are comparable that are 3,500 square feet on a canal with a pool, brand new, built in the last 3 years instead of the last 15 years. That's not a comp. There is nothing about that property that's comparable. Well, and they'll say, well, it's right. It's only 2 blocks away. But that's where the difference in knowing your market area comes in. It could be right across the street, but it's not going to be comparable to the subject. So think about that when you're talking to an appraiser, or when things happen, or you're again trying to do your CMAs. Make sure that you're comparable, that the properties that you're putting on the CMAs and that you're looking at are going to be in the same location, the same size, a similar view, similar age, condition, similar GLA, bedrooms and bathroom counts. In some areas, that's a really big thing. In some areas, it's not such a big thing. GLA, if you want to, not that it's not written in the guidelines any longer, but from Fannie Mae, but typically a comparable property has to be less than 20% larger or smaller than the subject property in gross living area. So that's something to keep in mind. 20% is not 3,500 square feet compared to 1,800 square feet. I want to clear that up, because if you're doing a CMA and you're putting these sales that just because they sold and they sold for the price that the homeowner thinks their house should be selling for, but they're not comparable to the subject, that house, number one, is going to sit on the market for way too long. Number two, when the appraiser does come out, it's not going to be, the value is not going to be the same because they're not comparable to each other. I've had people, like I said, I've had sales that were on the ocean and they compared them to sales that were on a lake. And I'm like, well, it's a water view. Well, no, it's not. It's not the same thing. So you have to know the market area. And that's one of the biggest things of the appraisal, is knowing the market area. So if we're all looking at a market area and we all are using the same definition for comparable or comps, and we're all using the same definition or the same general information about what a market area is, you won't have so many appraisals that come in too low. I'm not going to say you won't have any, because, not everybody's perfect. So we always have a pencil with an eraser, and we should always be willing to look at additional information that we might not have seen. So if you think that there's an issue and it's really the value, and you really know, and you've done your job and you've done your homework and you've looked at all of the things that we've discussed, then have your buyer or your seller request a reconsideration of value, but provide them. You have to, in order to get a reconsideration of value, you do have to provide the lender with at least 3 new comps. So keep that in mind. Okay, and the next slide. This is a big thing. We no longer, as the appraiser, we used to be able to say average, above average, below average, good condition, bad condition, fair condition. Nothing was the same. So in that book, that Bible that I told you we have to go by now, USPAP also has created definitions for condition and quality of construction ratings. Excuse me. And their numbers. And it's easy to figure it out. The definitions are in the back of an appraisal if you look at them, and it'll tell you. But here's the things that lead to discrepancies between an appraiser and a realtor. Keep a house that's been updated only has minor improvements like fresh paint. They painted the cabinets. They put new handles on the cabinets. They put 1 or 2 new appliances in it. It enhances the appearance of it, but it doesn't really affect the overall condition of it. That's an updated house, not an upgraded house. But when you look at the MLS listing, it'll say this house has been totally upgraded. And you look at the pictures and that's all there is in there. Well, that's not totally upgraded. That's just simply good maintenance and updated to be able to sell. A house that's upgraded is going to have major improvements like a new roof, new flooring, brand new cabinets, new down in South Florida, the impact windows, a new electrical service panel. Those things have been upgraded. They're no longer the old and dated appliances, the old and dated cabinets, the old leaky roof. It's been upgraded and been made new. That's going to make a difference, because if you're looking at a listing and it says upgraded and we see that it's only had fresh paint put on it, and it's not going to be the same comp, and it's not going to get the same value that you're looking at. It's not comparing comparable. A remodeled home is usually something that has affected the structure of the house, whether it's put in new walls, put on a legal addition, and that's of the same quality and workmanship as the rest of the house. Anything that structurally changes the property, changes its layouts, changes its functional functionality of it, that's going to be remodeled. And that's a higher end. And then, there are differences in the quality of the materials that are used. And that's something that we have to sift through as appraisers. But for you guys, when you're listing or when you're looking at showing properties, look at the pictures of what they're saying is upgraded and updated or remodeled, and you'll know what you're looking at and how to best deal. Explain it to your buyers or your sellers, and how you can make sure that everybody's thinking about the same thing at the same time. Okay, next slide. Joe, I'm about to run out of your time, so I'm going to go through these real quick here. When you guys are showing appraisers some information and and comps, your price per square foot is a good thing for you for your marketing and for discussion, but it's not going to be as reliable as what we would find what we end up with as a price per square foot, because we have to take into consideration all of those features: location, property, condition, upgrades, lot size. All of those are going to be different, and you guys don't really have to sit down and figure out what those prices are. It's something to talk about, but it's not something that we rely on when we're determining value. Next slide, please. And then these last few items are just maybe helpful for you, and how long will a realtor or a homeowner asks, how long will it take to get the appraisals? Appraisals can be very complex and vary in time and depending on the property and the appraiser's workload. And we can usually give you a reasonable time frame for what we're doing. But once that appraisal leaves our computer, we're not in charge of it anymore, and we can't tell you how long it's going to take after that. Like I said in the beginning, they go to the person who gave me the work, and they review it. It goes to the AMC who gave them the work, and they review it. And then it goes to the final lender, and they review it. So sometimes it happens quickly. Sometimes it can be 2-3 weeks. It has nothing to do with the appraiser. It has to do with all of the other steps that we now have to go through since the market crashed. Next slide. And here's a couple of the biggest ones. I've had realtors and homeowners and buyers ask me, or sellers ask me, if I can tell them what the value is. I can't tell you. I will not discuss value with you when I'm in the property. We're not allowed to. I cannot discuss value with anyone after I complete the appraisal. I don't own the appraisal. The borrower does not own the appraisal. It belongs to the lender. The only one we can discuss value with is the lender. The only one who can distribute that appraisal is the lender. So, like it says here, can you email me a copy of the appraisal? I can't do that either. It's not mine to do. I don't own it. It belongs to the lender. The lenders will typically give the borrower the appraisal within as soon as they accept it. I'm going to take a pause for a second here and answer Lisa's question. What can I help you with?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not sure, that doesn't even really seem fair that it doesn't belong to the borrower, because the borrower actually pays for the appraisal.
No, not under federal guidelines. The borrower does not pay for the appraisal. The borrower pays processing fees, which include an appraisal fee, but they are not paying the appraiser, and they are not paying for the appraisal. The lender does. The lender owns it.
When I was processing loans not too long ago, the borrower would have to actually pay for the appraisal before the appraiser could go out and appraise the property.
I understand what you're saying, but listen to the specific language that I'm using here. The borrower, it's because of the general conversations. You're paying your appraisal fee. You have to pay for the appraisal fee. Yes, but they're paying other fees too. They're paying for flood certs, underwriters, whatever. But the one that everybody says you have to pay the appraisal fee, in reality and in common sense, you're 1,000% right. They are paying for the appraisal. But under federal regulations, they are paying the lender for processing their mortgage application. And involved in those fees and the processing is an appraisal fee. But the lender pays the appraiser. I no longer pick up a check out the front door before I do the appraisal inspection. So it's not theirs. They don't own it. And I know that's why they call it the appraisal fee, but it doesn't go to me. It goes to the lender. So,
Interesting.
yeah,
Very interesting.
It was done to try to avoid any evidence or any insinuation of coercion or any conflict between the lenders, the appraisers, the borrowers, and the sellers. So when I first started this business, I used to pick up a check at the front door before I ever stepped in the house to do the appraisal. We don't get paid that way anymore. So the borrower does not own that appraisal. They will get a copy of it, but they can only get a copy of it from their lender. I am not allowed to give out that appraisal. It's not mine. Doesn't make sense, but it does make sense.
Well, I'm thinking that might be some, leverage now. I mean, if it belongs to the lender, then the lender should pay for it, and the borrower shouldn't have to.
Well, it depends. Does the borrower want to finish getting a loan application? Because it's not just the appraisal fee; it's a processing fee, and that's what it's going to show. They're paying a processing fee that includes the cost of the appraisal, but that's a debate that they need to have with the federal regulators. Says it's not something that you can go back to the lender and say, well, you own it, so you have to pay for it. Because technically my check comes from the lender. My check doesn't come from the borrower. I have no idea what they charge the borrower, and the borrower has no idea what I charge them. So it's done to keep everybody safe and keep everybody on the up and up. So there's no going back and forth anymore.
I think we have a question.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Lorna, what can I help you with?
Sure. Thanks for that question, Lisa, because I believe everybody had that thought too. So you're not the only one, my dear. I had that thought too. But I have two questions. Earlier you said there are different users, right?
Yes.
And my question is, the different users, does that have a bearing on the value, the overall value at the end of the day, or it doesn't matter who the user is, the value of opinion is that?
The value
the opinion of value is as
it depends on if they're requesting a fair market value. The user is the one who tells you what kind of value that they need, whether they want fair market value, retrospective value as of a date of death in an estate case. Do they need a pre-foreclosure value? Do they need an as repaired value? So the value, the numbers, the process is always the same, but the user and what they're going to use it for can change.
Okay, understood. The other question I have is, so I have this one property, and within 6 weeks, I've had two different appraisals. One was Fannie Mae and one was FHA. And the FHA actually came back higher, $30,000 more than the other one. And so my question to you is, and again, I know it's an opinion of value. Is there like a margin of error that appraisers work with? Like, for instance, how is that possible then? As again, I know it's an opinion of value, but if they're using the same comps and everything, is there like you say, like with the square footage, you say there's a 20% leeway that, you can go 20% higher, and use it as a comp. Is it the same thing in this case? Is like you say, okay, with it, a margin of error is this amount as opposed to, is there something like that that appraisers go by?
There is not a standard. There's not, it's not written anywhere. The rule of thumb is that if it's within if both appraisals are within 5%, the lender can choose which one to use.
Okay.
And usually 5% is not a big deal. Nobody's exact.
Right.
$30,000 seems like more than 5% of anything. So
Right.
there's, if I was reviewing those appraisals, I would have to sit down and compare them. I can't really speak without seeing them, but $30,000 is a big difference. If they switched from conventional to FHA, it doesn't really matter what the conventional one was for the sake of that loan, because the borrower is not going conventional any longer. So they will use the FHA appraisal and the value there. Or they typically, that's what they should be doing anyway. But there's really not that's why we still allow for reconsiderations of value. Because it's an opinion. And if you put 5 people in a room and you show them all the same thing, you're going to have 5 different values, but they should be reasonably close to each other. So without seeing those appraisals and without getting myself into too much trouble, I would say that there could be an issue on one of those appraisals, but I don't know which one it is because there's no way for me to see it. If it was in the reverse and the FHA one came in $30,000 lower, my suggestion would be to request a reconsideration of value. But there seems like definitely somebody didn't know their market area. Is my guess. It seems like just from the general conversation that it would be a difference in knowing your market area, because you shouldn't have that kind of a difference in range.
All right.
Okay, does that make sense?
Oh, yes, that answers the question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and I think we have 1 or 2 more quick slides before I bore everybody to death. The private appraisals versus mortgage or financing appraisals. This is one of the things I was saying about the different types of users and the different types of appraisals. They're still getting the same fair market value. It depends on the type of value that they're asking for. It depends on the type of comps that we use. If they're looking for a quick sale value for a short sale or foreclosure, then we're going to find comps that were foreclosures or quick sales so that we can show what the market is paying, the difference that they're paying for that. It all has to be market based. If they're doing a rehabilitation appraisal and they're refinancing it to remodel the house, then we have to have copies of all of the improvements that they're going to make so that we can select properties, comparable properties to that, and give a value for what that property would be worth, given that if all of those things were completed, and the value would be XYZ. So it always depends on what the property is going to, who's using it and what it's going to be used for, the appraisal. We do same fair market value, but with different parameters for attorneys, for court cases, for estate settlement, divorce, for tax liens, tax purposes, for sellers before they want to list their property, for buyers who are buying a cash transaction and want to make sure they're getting the right value for the property. They're not overpaying for the property. And the private appraisals go directly to the client that hires the appraiser. In this case, it is directly to that person. If I'm doing an appraisal for any reason other than a mortgage, federally regulated mortgage transaction, that buyer has to pay me. That buyer gets, that client gets the appraisal, and they can do whatever they want to do with it, except use it for mortgage purposes. They cannot use it for that. They no longer are allowed to provide their own appraisal to a mortgage company. And the next slide. Okay, so we're at the end, and I'm sorry I overtalked, and I apologize. But if you guys have any questions that we didn't cover, or the things that I covered that inspired new questions, feel free to reach out to me. And I appreciate your time. And I hope you all have. Oh, I see, Lisa, you have a question.
Yes, I'm sorry. I had quite a lot going on this morning. I was getting a new water heater, so I may have missed something about when you're appraising, like if what is the average, I guess, deduction, or what would you like add or subtract for like bedrooms and bathrooms? What's the dollar amount?
There is no set dollar amount.
Oh,
That's the short answer. There is no set dollar amount. It's all market based, and that's where it comes into analyzing your market area. In some neighborhoods, a 3-bedroom and a 4-bedroom house are the same value. They sell for the same price.
okay. And what about a garage?
Again, it depends on the market. It all has to be, I don't determine it. The market tells me what to do with it. I know in the old days when I started out, back in the dark ages before there were even cell phones, guys, a fireplace was worth $2,500. Every comp was adjusted at $20 a square foot, whether the house was a multi-million-dollar house or a $20,000 house. Everything got adjusted the same. That really wasn't appraising. That was really just filling in a form and throwing numbers up there.
Okay.
You actually have to take the time. So those old, what would you give for? I don't know, because it depends on the market.
Well, that's kind of the first thing that we learn in real estate. It's like the value of a house is what someone's willing to pay for it, basically.
Yes, but and you're right. That's what, but that's not fair market value. That's what somebody is willing to pay for it.
Kind of like in 2022 when people were moving down here from New York and paying $20,000 and $50,000 over. So all my poor buyers that had financing couldn't compete.
Exactly.
Oh, it was terrible. Oh my gosh.
Yes, it was. I got an appraisal request to do one, and they were paying $150,000 more for a house. And it was $1 million house to begin with. And I was like, I'll tell you what, I said, come back and see me in 6 months when when 3 other people have bought houses and done the same thing, and I'll give you an idea. Yeah, it's value and fair market value are 2 different things. It's worth whatever somebody's willing to pay for it, but that doesn't mean that that's what the market is willing to pay for it. And if you're
getting financing, I guess.
Yeah, if you're financing it, and you'd be amazed at a lot of those people that bought houses for cash turned around and refinanced them at the same time and closed on a refinance at the same time. So they weren't using their cash. They were using the bank's cash. But
yeah, that's actually when I was doing the mortgage loan processing, and I saw a lot of that happen.
Yeah, but the value to here's the simple solution, simple background of it. What the fair market value is based on a market, not an individual. Because if that individual is willing to pay $40,000 more, $50,000 more for a house, but then they quit making their payments and the house goes into foreclosure, is the next buyer going to still want to pay $50,000 more for that house?
Probably not.
So that's why we do fair market value, not just the value is what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Well, thank you. You've been very, very informative, Dorothy. We appreciate you being here today.
I appreciate you guys letting me pick up some of your day, and I hope that it helped. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You need an appraisal done for a seller or a buyer. I still do private appraisals too. So just reach out anytime you want with any questions. I always will try to help answer them.
Dorothy,
well, thank you so much. Sorry.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Dorothy, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, it was, I learned a lot during this. I think you shared a lot of really, really good information. Keep in mind, this video is recorded, guys. So if you want to watch it later, you'll be able to find it. We'll put a link in the agent resources. It'll also be on our YouTube page so people can find it there. But thank you again so much, Dorothy. Your knowledge was just pouring out of you during this training, and it really means a lot that you took the time to come in. And I think everybody that watched this and everybody that was here definitely walked away with something that they can use right away, and it should add value not only to the services that they offer, but value to the customers. So I really, really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I'd love to have you back on. Hopefully you have some more knowledge to share. We'd definitely love to have you back. Thank you so very much.
Anytime, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy.
And everybody
You're welcome, guys.
Everybody take her contact info. One last thing before we end here, we're going to do one more shameless plug. So this is, again, if you learned something on this, these are the types of things that we as a company that we want to share with our agents to make them better, to help them to serve their customers better. So please scan the QR code or look down in the comments and you'll find information on how to get in contact with us. Keep in touch with us. Now, the next couple of weeks, we may not be having these Ask the Broker sessions because of the holidays. So, just keep an eye out for, the announcements on those. We haven't decided which days we will or will not be doing these, but we've got a few really big holidays coming up here. So, we're going to keep that in mind. So that's all we have today. Thank you all so much.